Italy is rushing headlong into elections in March that many are predicting will see humiliation for the governing centre-left and an extraordinary political revival. Despite some claims that the government's made some significant economic gains while in power, and despite the mixed results of populist five-star candidates in local government, the upstart party is polling strongly. Prime Ministerial candidate Luigi Di Maio said his candidates represented a new era. Definitely of another era, and banned from office for fraud, former Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi is positioning himself as the known quantity statesman, faced with inexperience and division, and has allied his Forza Italia Conservatives with the far-right and Northern League nationalists. The centre-left Democratic Party is reeling, disunited and now angry that leader Matteo Renzi appears to have strong-armed loyalists into safe seats in the just concluded selection process.
The Trump administration has named scores of senior Russian officials and businessmen close to the Kremlin. A who's who of Russia's elite, the US Treasury Department report provided to Congress has already been dubbed the Putin or oligarchs list. In addition to Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and other political figures, the bosses of major state-owned companies and billionaires are also on it. While the report was prompted in part by Washington's belief Moscow meddled in the 2016 US presidential election, the Treasury Department has made clear this is not a sanctions list, even if some of those on it are already subject to sanctions. The report's publication comes amid continued scrutiny of President Trump's relationship with Russia and Vladimir Putin.
The UK will be worse off after Brexit no matter what deal is struck. So says a government assessment leaked to BuzzFeed. The report says that under a comprehensive free trade agreement with the EU, UK growth would be 5% lower over the next 15 years compared to current forecasts. The no-deal scenario, which would see the UK revert to World Trade Organization rules, would reduce growth by 8% over that period. Even if Britain remained in the single market, growth would still be lowered by 2% in the longer term. The report suggests every sector of the economy and every UK region would be negatively impacted in all scenarios, with London's status as a financial centre seriously eroded. A government spokesperson said it wasn't prepared to provide a running commentary on any aspect of ongoing work. Leading Brexiteers have dismissed the report.
Protests have taken place in Lebanon after the Foreign Minister Gibran Basil was filmed calling Parliamentary Speaker Nabi Berri a thug. Supporters of Berri burnt tyres in the streets and carried flags of his Shiite Amal movement. It highlights tensions between Berri and President Michel Aoun, who's Basil's father-in-law. Basil said Berri has a problem with the president, but why is he involving me or expats? He's trying to create divisions by asking Shiites to boycott any conference by threatening their businesses. This is a thug and not a president of a parliament. He was speaking after Aoun promoted a number of Lebanese army officers. One Amal supporter said Basil is saying words bigger than him. He's not up to the standard of Mr. Berri. Mr. Berri is one of the pillars of Lebanon. This is not acceptable. We support Speaker Berri. Another said, we went down to the streets without any orders from the Amal movement. The Amal movement is a social phenomenon that anyone can be affected by, be it a member of the Amal movement or not. Nabi Berri is not a militia. Nabi Berri is the Speaker of the Lebanese Parliament, and we are Lebanese citizens. Basil's remarks were also rejected by Hezbollah, who are allies of Aoun, but also supporters of Berri's Amal movement. In a statement, the organisation said such comments do not build a state, but create more crises and disunity. More than 1,500 delegates have been taking part in the Syrian National Dialogue Congress in Sochi, but the opposition umbrella group, the High Negotiations Committee, aren't there. Syria's main Kurdish group also stayed away from the Russian-brokered peace talks because of the Turkish offensive in Afrin. But the Moscow platform, which claims to represent Syrian opposition groups, is there. Their leader is Kadri Jamil. He says, here we will discuss the future content of the Constitution. Different sides represented here have different opinions, and we will all have to learn how to reach a consensus. Syrians for a long time have not experienced any political freedom in order to talk, to discuss, and to find a solution through a compromise. Many Syrian activists don't recognize the Moscow platform or Qadri Jamil, a former member of Assad's government, but Jamil insists he just wants to kickstart the peace talks. He says now in Sochi we are trying to start the inter-Syrian dialogue which will provide the political support to the Geneva process. Euronews reporter Galina Polonsky explains what the delegates are hoping to achieve. She says one of the major goals of the Congress in Sochi is to select candidates for the Commission for the Constitutional Reform in Syria. There will be other difficult, considered for now to be the dead end, questions discussed. What is clear is that the main result of this Congress is a process which could begin this Tuesday.
Galina Polonskaya, Euronews, Sochi.
Catalonia's parliament is set to choose its next president later, but the official candidate Carles Puigdemont remains in Belgium, at least for now. Spain's constitutional court has said the fugitive politician must appear in person at the plenary session on Tuesday if he wants to be sworn in as regional leader. Puigdemont's lawyer has refused to rule out a surprise appearance in the assembly. But the ousted politician faces almost certain arrest on charges of rebellion and sedition if he returns to Spain. Catalan Speaker Roger Torrent faces several difficult choices. He could allow a vote with either Puigdemont present or join via video link, defying Madrid and the court. Another option would be to seek a different candidate, risking the wrath of the pro-independence movement.
President Trump is preparing for his State of the Union address, which he says will be big and important. But what's he likely to say? NBC's Ali Vitali has this report for Euronews.
A big day with big stakes for President Donald Trump here in Washington as he's getting ready to give his first official State of the Union address. The White House has been mum on what exactly the president might say. We've gotten some key themes from senior administration officials. First of all, look for the president to give a fundamentally optimistic speech about the state of the United States. He's going to present a safe, strong, and proud American vision that gives not just America's place in the world, but America's place in the world as Donald Trump would like it to be. Second, look for him to talk about bipartisanship. Now, that's not a word you hear too often acted upon from Donald Trump, who has been known to lash out at Democrats and his opponents on Twitter, but he's going to need them if he wants to pass key legislation that he wants on immigration and on infrastructure. Finally, you can't do bipartisanship without Democrats, of course, and the guests that they're inviting to the State of the Union actually give a good sense of how that might go. Spoiler alert, it might not go well, especially when they're inviting people like San Juan Mayor Cruz, who was very critical of Trump's response to Puerto Rico, and sexual misconduct survivors and sexual assault survivors, an issue that the president has not necessarily been outspoken on, despite the big Me Too movement coming in the United States. Overall, we're going to look for Trump to stay on script and give a very broad message for what he sees as the State of the Union. In Washington, D.C., Ali Vitali for Euronews.
The Irish government has agreed to hold a referendum at the end of May on whether to reform the country's near-total ban on abortion. People will vote on whether to repeal a constitutional amendment that gives equal right to the life of a fetus and the mother during pregnancy, effectively prohibiting terminations.
And I don't believe the Constitution is the place for making absolute statements about medical, moral and legal issues. For my part, I will advocate a yes vote. My own views have evolved over time. Life experience does that. But it was as Minister for Health that I became convinced that abortion had no place in our Constitution.
In 1983, 67% of the voting population supported the ban. Now, polls suggest Irish society is divided, with the result too close to call. After double the usual January rainfall, the flood level in Paris has peaked at just under 6 metres. The swollen River Seine has put the famous Bateau Mouche out of action and forced one of the Louvre's galleries to close. But away from the tourist attractions, residents of many suburbs to the west of the French capital have found themselves wading into their homes after the river burst its banks. basements and gardens are submerged, and in many areas gas has been cut off, meaning no heat and no hot water. This couple explains that the inhabitants of Montesson didn't want to extend the dike they were building because it would hide their view of the Seine. Now they've had enough of being flooded each time the water level rises. Montesson may be in for a long wait. Weeks of rain have saturated the ground, meaning it could take several days or even weeks for the flooding to subside.
Televidente, vamos a un corte comercial. Ahora nos está back el deporte con nuestro colega Carl Reuter.